Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. Here is our today's topic. I shall tell you about the auxiliary verbs and the types of auxiliary verbs. What is an auxiliary verb? A verb that is used with a main verb to show tense is called an auxiliary verb. Auxiliary verbs are also called helping verbs. Auxiliary verbs are of two kinds. The first kind is known as the primary auxiliary verbs, and the second kind is known as the modal auxiliary verbs. Here is the first kind, which is the primary auxiliary verb, and to do, to be, and to have are the primary auxiliary verbs. Here are the modal auxiliary verbs, and the modal auxiliary verbs express various functions. Let's first talk about the first kind of the auxiliary verbs, which is known as the primary auxiliary verbs. To do, as I have told you earlier, is an example of the primary auxiliary verb, and it is used for indefinite tenses, the present, past, and future indefinite tenses, and in negative and interrogative forms of these tenses. And do, does, did, and will do are the examples of to do primary auxiliary verbs. The other examples are to be, and these auxiliary verbs are used to form the continuous tenses, the present, past, and future continuous tenses, as well as the passive voice sentences. And the examples of the to be form of the primary auxiliary verbs are is, am, are, was, were, being, been, and will be. I shall tell you about the other kind of the primary auxiliary verb, which is known as to have form. And these are used to form perfect tenses, present, past, and future perfect tenses. And these are has, have, had, having, and will have. Let me tell you about the second kind of the auxiliary verb, which is known as the modal auxiliary verbs. And an auxiliary verb that is used to express a certain function is known as the modal auxiliary verb. For example, a modal auxiliary verb can show an advice. For example, you shouldn't be wasting time in useless activities. Shouldn't here is a modal auxiliary verb which is showing advice. A modal auxiliary verb can also show ability. For example, can you drive a car? Can here is the modal auxiliary verb and it is showing the ability to do something. A modal auxiliary verb can also show suggestion or offer. For example, shall we go out for a cup of coffee? Shall here is the modal auxiliary verb showing an offer. A modal auxiliary verb can also express prohibition. For example, you must not disturb the patient. Must here is the modal auxiliary verb and it is showing a certain function which is prohibition. A modal auxiliary verb can also show a request. For example, can you please turn on the fan? Can here is the modal auxiliary verb. It can also show possibility. For example, it may hail tomorrow. You can see that may here is showing possibility. So it is a modal verb. A modal verb can also show permission. For example, may I please be seated here? May here is showing permission. So it is a modal verb. A modal verb can also express obligation. For example, you must complete this task right now. So, must here is an example of a modal verb showing obligation. Here are some modal verbs. They are can, could, may, might, must, will, would, shall, should, ought, dare, need, needn't, shan't, won't, wouldn't, couldn't, and can't. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Allah Hafiz.